She just moved into her new place and hadn't gotten around to hanging curtains yet. Little did she know, that small detail nearly cost her her life. One evening, as the woman casually glanced out the window, a strange figure in the building across the street suddenly caught her eye. Realizing this stranger might be watching her, she quickly got up to take a closer look, but before she could even reach the window, the eerie silhouette vanished without a trace. She kept telling herself she was just overthinking it, but that gnawing sense of unease kept her tossing and turning all night. So she got out of bed, walked to the window, and tried to put her mind at ease. But the moment she looked up at the window across the way, there he was again, that same eerie figure, standing right there, his gaze seemingly locked onto her. First thing the next morning, she rushed out to order curtains, but on her way home, something unsettling caught her attention. That mysterious apartment across the street kept its curtains drawn even in broad daylight, as if they were hiding something. And every night, without fail, that shadowy figure would appear in the same spot, its outline growing sharper and more distinct each time. Since the stranger hadn't actually done anything to harm her, all she could do was grit her teeth and wait, praying her curtains would arrive soon. Then one day, while she and her husband were taking a walk downstairs, they found the neighborhood swarming with police and paramedics. She had no idea what had happened, but a sinking feeling crept into her gut. Sure enough, the next day's news confirmed her worst fears. A gruesome murder had taken place right in their community. According to the report, the killer had already committed several similar crimes, a full-blown serial case. Every victim was an attractive young woman, and what made it even more baffling was that the killer wasn't after money or sex. His only motive seemed to be a twisted, unexplainable urge to kill. A cold sweat washed over her. She couldn't help but wonder, could this be connected to that creepy figure across the street? She immediately told her husband everything she'd experienced over the past few days, but after hearing her out, he just brushed it off. He said she was being way too paranoid, the guy was probably just an insomniac enjoying the view. No reason to get all worked up over nothing. Not only did her husband refuse to take her seriously, he actually turned it into a joke, telling his friends about how easily spooked his wife was, all for a few laughs. She forced a smile on the outside, but inside, the weight on her chest only grew heavier. So while her husband was out at work, she found a busy cafe and started researching the killer on her laptop. But the moment she heard the sole survivor's account, her eyes went wide with shock. The girl in the video recalled that in the days leading up to the attack, she'd had this constant feeling like someone was watching her from the shadows. That was exactly what she was going through right now. Her anxiety spiraled. She kept feeling like someone was right behind her, but every time she spun around, it was just ordinary people passing by. Maybe her nerves really were getting the best of her. On impulse, she ducked into a nearby movie theater, hoping a film might calm her down. The theater was nearly empty. She deliberately picked a seat in the middle with no one around, but shortly after the movie started, a figure slipped into the seat directly behind her. The whole theater was wide open, yet this person chose the spot closest to her. A chill ran down her spine. She could sense the stranger inching closer. In a flash of panic, she bolted from her seat, glancing back over and over as she sprinted out of the theater. But to her surprise, the figure didn't follow. Desperate to shake off the anxiety, she headed straight for the most crowded place she could find, the supermarket. Surrounded by shoppers coming and going, she finally felt a sliver of relief. But just as she was calmly picking out groceries, convincing herself it was all in her head, a shopper appeared behind her that set every alarm bell ringing. The shoes. They were the exact same pair from the theater. Panic hit her like a freight train. She pretended to stay calm and casually moved away, using her peripheral vision to track the person behind her, trying to shake him off. But as she turned a corner, there he was again.
Is there a back door?
She rushed home in a daze. Her husband noticed right away that something was wrong and pressed her for answers. Even though she knew he probably wouldn't believe her, she told him everything and insisted that the man following her was the same one from the building across the street. To ease her mind, her husband took her back to the supermarket, hoping the security footage might turn up some evidence. Based on her detailed description, the staff quickly found the footage, but no matter how they looked at it, the man's behavior seemed perfectly normal. If anything, it was her actions that looked suspicious. Seeing that her husband still didn't understand, she felt both crushed and speechless. All she could do was snap a photo of the stranger from the footage. That night, lying awake in the dark, she made a bold decision. The next day, after seeing her husband off to work as usual, she planted herself by the window, peering through a tiny gap in the curtains, watching everyone who came and went from the building across the street, hoping to spot her stalker. But after an entire day, she came up empty. The self-doubt began to eat at her again. As night fell, all she could do was stare helplessly at that pitch-black window across the way. Then, a sudden, urgent knock at the door shattered the silence. Her heart leapt into her throat. She tiptoed to the door and peeked through the peephole before daring to open it. It was the elderly woman from downstairs. The old lady was gesturing wildly, trying to explain something, but the woman couldn't understand her dialect at all. Thankfully, the neighbor next door stepped in, explaining that the old lady was looking for her missing cat, and helped translate. the old lady finally left. Noticing that her neighbor was around the same age, the woman felt an instant sense of connection, and the neighbor was warm and friendly in return. She told the woman that this neighborhood wasn't exactly the safest, which was why she kept a handgun at home for protection. The woman nodded, she'd already figured that out the hard way. The two of them chatted and laughed, sharing a rare moment of ease. It made the woman feel even more certain she'd been overthinking everything. Back in her apartment, she gathered her courage and pulled open the curtains. Sure enough, the figure was still there. But this time, it was completely motionless. She let out a long sigh of relief. She'd been scaring herself this whole time, but just as she was about to laugh at her own paranoia, the shadow suddenly moved. By the time her husband got home from work, she was sobbing uncontrollably. But when he walked to the window to check, the apartment across the street was completely dark. Finally, at his wife's relentless insistence, her husband called the police. She poured out every detail of her ordeal to the officers and handed over the photo from the supermarket footage. Taking her complaint seriously, the police decided to investigate the apartment in question immediately. Her husband went along, leaving her home alone to wait. After what felt like an eternity, her husband finally returned, looking troubled and uncertain.
Francis, was it him?
Listen for a second. Even if it was him, the guy lives in our neighborhood. It's not crazy to think that he'd be shopping at the same store.
You think I'm crazy?
No, I think you're stressed.
Stop!
From that day on, the woman avoided going outside altogether. She barricaded herself inside, propped a chair against the front door, and never dared to open the curtains again. But even then, she couldn't shake the feeling that the killer could break in at any moment. Just as she was getting ready for bed, she heard strange noises coming from her neighbor's apartment. She assumed the neighbor had come home from work. She pressed her ear to the wall to listen and instantly realized something was very wrong next door. She pounded on the neighbor's door over and over, but got no response. The commotion drew other residents and the landlord. At the woman's desperate urging, the landlord used a spare key to open the door. But inside, no one, just a cat and a shattered lamp. And that cat? It was the same one the old lady downstairs had been looking for. The woman was stunned. Could that scream have just been the cat? Her outburst enraged the other neighbors. The landlord even complained about her behavior to her husband. Meanwhile, something else was eating at her. The neighbor hadn't come home all night. Something felt very wrong. She immediately called her neighbor's workplace only to learn she hadn't shown up for work either. Just then, a strange man appeared at the neighbor's door. After talking to him, the woman discovered he was the neighbor's husband. He said he'd made plans with his wife the night before, but she'd stood him up without explanation, so he'd come looking for her. He figured she was hiding inside, refusing to see him. But the woman told him firmly her neighbor never came home last night. She asked him for the neighbor's phone number and dialed it. The ringtone came from inside the neighbor's apartment, but the man still assumed his wife was deliberately avoiding him and turned to leave in frustration. The woman called after him and begged him for a small favor. She brought him to the building across the street, explained everything, the peeping, the stalking, and asked him to knock on that door and confront the mysterious man face to face. Furious on her behalf, the man banged on the door. No answer. Assuming no one was home, he said goodbye and left, but the woman was certain someone was inside. She stepped up and tried knocking herself, and the door swung open on its own. But standing in the doorway wasn't the mysterious man. It was an old man in his 80s. Embarrassed, the woman quickly apologized and turned to leave. But as she waited for the elevator, there he was, the stalker, coming up from the stairwell. His cold, menacing eyes boring into her. She dove into the elevator. Through the closing doors, he stood there, staring, unblinking until the doors sealed shut. Back home, her spirits hit rock bottom. Her husband, seeing her miserable day after day, tried a different approach. He showed her a news article. The serial killer had been arrested. He urged her to stop worrying, the real culprit was behind bars now. But as the woman stared at the unfamiliar face in the mugshot, something still didn't sit right. She was convinced this wasn't the real killer. She started packing her bags immediately. She was getting out of this apartment for good. Halfway through packing, she heard music coming from next door. Could her neighbor be back? Driven by concern, after all, this neighbor was her only friend here. She went to check. She knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. The door was unlocked. Inside, there was no sign of the neighbor. But before she could make sense of it, someone attacked her from behind. It was him, the man who'd been stalking her all along. Wounded and bleeding, she dragged herself across the floor, desperate to escape. But the blood loss was too much, and her body gave out. At that very moment, her husband spotted the half-packed suitcase. Something clicked. He grabbed his phone and called her. The second the line connected, a ringtone echoed from the apartment next door. He burst out of the apartment and ran straight into the stalker trying to flee. Everything clicked into place. He lunged forward to stop him, but before he could, a gunshot rang out from behind, and the stalker crumpled to the ground. The woman had been playing dead. She'd found the handgun inside her neighbor's apartment, and in the end, she took him down herself. She stepped out of the apartment and looked across at her husband, the man who had never once believed her. Whatever she'd once felt for him was gone.